Welcome back, class. We'll start off with lecture set number 6 this evening, looking at personality chapter 11 and social psychology chapter 12. In discussing personality, we're looking at definitions and examples, reviewing the historical perspectives including that of Sigmund Freud, levels of consciousness, defense mechanisms, and the controversial psychosexual stages of development. We'll also look at the neo-Freudians, those that followed Freud. We'll also examine personality by perspectives of learning approaches, humanistic approaches, biological approaches, and then traits. Then we'll examine select topics from social psychology, current issues and examples, an overview of the field, looking at attributions, role-playing, cognitive dissonance, persuasion, and social influence. We start off by asking the following question. What is personality? Personality refers to the long-standing traits and patterns that propel individuals to consistently think, feel, and behave in specific ways. Our personality is what makes us unique individuals. You know your personality, how it is that you behave given certain circumstances. You also can identify your friend's personality as well, or close family members. It is the characteristic way that describes who you are. And we basically look at how we think and feel and act in a variety of different types of situations. That sort of gives us, in a nutshell, what your personality is. Now, historically, personality has been thought of for some time. The concept of personality has been studied for at least a couple of thousand years, going all the way back to Hippocrates in 370 BCE, the Hippocratic Oath. Hippocrates basically thought about what is and makes this thing the personality. Centuries later, the Greek physician Galen suggested that both disease and personality differences could be explained by imbalances in what they called the humors, and that each person exhibited one of four types of temperaments. In 1780, Francis Gall, a German physician, proposed that the distances between bumps on the skull reveal a person's personality traits, character, and mental abilities. Now, as we look at things now, we can look back and see how this was wrong in many ways, how they sort of steered away from what we call strict science. In fact, the pseudoscience of measuring the areas of a person's skull is known as phrenology, the thing that Francis Gall came up with. Gall developed a chart that depicted which areas of the skull corresponded to particular personality traits or characteristics. In 1825, the lithograph at the top right depicts someone, Gall, examining the skull of a young woman. It would be something that would be seen sort of at parties sometimes, sort of like a party activity. Somebody who was trained in phrenology would look at someone's skull and be able to tell about their personality traits. Now, taking up on this idea, Galen and other researchers contributed to the development of his primary temperament types. Most prominently were Immanuel Kant and the psychologist that started the academic area of psychology, Wilhelm Wundt. They developed from Galen's theory of the four temperaments. Kant proposed the trait words to describe each temperament. Wundt later suggested the arrangement of the traits on two major axes, such as strong emotions or weak, unchangeable temperament, or changeable temperaments. And you can see some of the descriptors. Each one is sort of based on the four temperament types that were proposed earlier. Now, one of the key figures in more modern times is going to be Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud's psychodynamic perspective of personality was the first comprehensive theory of personality, explaining a wide variety of both normal and abnormal behaviors. He thought one of the key driving forces in the development of personality was unconscious drives influenced by sex and aggression. Along with childhood sexuality are the forces that influence our personality. Other major theories that we'll see will be learning, humanistic, biological, evolutionary, trait, and cultural perspectives toward the development of our personality. So in this iceberg, we see superego, id, and ego clearly labeled on the iceberg. Now, here let's look at what those things represent. The id contains our most primitive drives and urges, very biological type urges, and is present in us from birth. So we are born with our id. The superego develops as a child as we interact with others, learning the social rules for right and wrong, as our mother tells us to do this or behave well, or those types of things. When we begin to internalize those rules of morals and behavior, that's when our superego develops. And that is thought to occur around 4 or 5 years of age. Then we have the ego. The ego is the rational part of our personality. It's what Freud considered to be the self. So as you think about yourself, as you're watching this video, you're thinking about the ego, according to Freud. So the self-ego synonymous here. And it is the part of our personality that is seen by others. So when you interact with somebody, you're interacting with their ego. The job of the ego or the self is to balance the aggressive, pleasure-seeking drives of the id and the moral control of the superego. So a statement that you would probably hear the id state, if it could state something, it would be, I want to do that now! Exclamation point. There's no ability to delay gratification to the id. If your id is in control, your id will do things immediately to get self-gratification. The superego, it's not right to do that, would be a statement that it would make. Because it is basically your moral control, right and wrong. The ego is you. And you're the one that has to referee, so to speak, the battle between the irrationality of the id and the irrationality of the superego. Think about it. If you want something now, it may be inappropriate to do that now. You could get in all sorts of trouble if you acted on what the id wanted you to. But the same thing goes too for your superego. Somebody's bullying someone else, and these are a biker gang or something. Well, your superego says you must step in front of them immediately and save this person. But you know doing so could probably put yourself at great risk. So the ego is the one that tries to make these decisions because of the irrationality of the id in the superego. Case in point here. Let's say you're walking in your neighborhood, you look down and you see a big thick envelope. You pick it up and you see there's about $10,000-$15,000 in large bills in that thing. What do? Do you keep it? And that's what your id would say. Or do you go through all sorts of rigmarole to try to find out who this money belongs to? And that's what your superego would demand. Your ego, you, the self, will have to make that decision as to what you're going to do. Now, sometimes we do things that we know probably aren't good for us or maybe slightly in the wrong. There could be situations that result us in feeling anxious or having some sort of anxiety. Feelings of anxiety result from the ego's inability to mediate the conflict between the id and superego. For example, maybe you did something that the superego wanted, and now you feel nervous because something may happen to you because you told on somebody from the neighborhood because you saw them do something. Or you could have the id be in control and you kept that money that we just talked about previously. You kept that money, $15,000, and now you may feel a little bit guilty about it. Freud believed that the ego seeks to restore balance through various protective measures known as defense mechanisms. These unconscious protective measures and protective behaviors are aimed to reduce our anxiety that we feel. You can go over them a little bit more at your leisure in your textbook and review the notes. But let me just focus on one that we sort of alluded to earlier, and that's going to be the following: rationalization. Going back to the money example, so you have this $15,000 now, and you're feeling a little bit guilty about it. That's your superego, by the way, making you feel guilty there because you did the wrong thing. You kept the money. That could have been somebody's mortgage payment or whatever the case may be. So the idea here is that you may come up with another reason a better reason for you to be able to deal with yourself. Rationalization is justifying behaviors by substituting acceptable reasons for less acceptable real reasons. So I kept $15,000 of found money. I didn't turn it in or donate it anywhere. I kept it for my own self. And you say something like, well, this was probably drug money. And if it's gotten to the people who earned this money or stole this money, it would do nothing but cause more harm in our neighborhood. A rationalization you can live with. The example they give here, Kim failed his history course because he did not study or attend class. That's the real answer as to why he failed. But he told his roommates that he failed because the professor didn't like him. That is the rationalization. Now let's look at the stages of psychosexual development. And of course, from the name itself, you know one of the key emphasis that Freud proposed in our developing our personality is sex. So in each psychosexual stage of development, the child's pleasure-seeking urges come from the id and are focused on a different area of the body. And this area of the body is called an erogenous zone, which you may have heard of before. The stages are oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. Let's look at them. The oral stage occurs from birth to around 18 months. The pleasure centers on the mouth, sucking, biting, and chewing. And if you've been around any kid at this age, you know if they grab a hold of something, they're usually going to be shoving it into their mouth. Then we have the anal stage, which happens from 18 to approximately 36 months. The pleasure focuses on bowel and bladder elimination. During this time frame, by the way, you not only have toilet training, but you also have the terrible twos. The focus here is on coping with demands of control, controlling one's bowel and controlling one's bladder. Then we have the phallic stage, the controversial one, occurs from age 3 to around age 6 years of age. Here, the pleasure zone is the genitals, and one of the focuses is coping with incestuous sexual feelings. We'll talk more about that in the next slide. Then we go to the latency stage, from about 6 years of age to puberty, a phase of dormant sexual feelings. At this point, you can think of this as kids just being kids, no sexual thoughts or feelings whatsoever. Then we go to the genital stage. This happens as we go into puberty and on past puberty. This is the maturation of sexual interests. Look at the phallic stage, the controversial stage that Freud proposed. Per Freud, conflict arises when the child feels a desire for the opposite sex parent and jealousy and hatred toward the same sex parent. For boys, this is called the Oedipus complex, involving a boy's desire for his mother and his urge to replace his father, who is seen as a rival for the mother's attention. The boy is afraid of his father that he will be punished by him for these feelings, because the father is more powerful, larger, stronger, older, and he experiences this anxiety referred to as castration anxiety. Per Freud, the penis is seen as a thing of power and a representation of power. Ergo, the removal of the penis or the castration anxiety there. Let's just talk real briefly here about this idea of the Oedipus complex. Why Oedipus? It's an old Greek story, and I'm going to mangle it for you, but I'm going to give you the gist of it, where a king goes to a fortune teller. The fortune teller tells the king that his son is going to grow up and murder him. King does not like hearing this, therefore he arranges to have the boy abandoned upon birth, and he forgets about the kid. At the time that he was abandoned, a childless couple comes across this abandoned baby. They raise him as their own. Years and years and decades pass, and now we have that boy is now a strong grown man. He travels to another area, another land. He comes across a group of which includes the king. He battles, wins, and kills the king, and takes his spoils by taking over the kingdom and also taking over the wife of that former vanquished and murdered king. So now he's the new king with new lands and a new wife. And you've probably already guessed it. The king that he killed was his biological father that had abandoned him years ago. And the person that he is now taken for his wife is his mother. That is the story of Oedipus. So that tells you why he named it Oedipus complex, about this mother-son thing. Now, the electric complex, while often attributed to Freud, was actually proposed by Freud's protege, Carl Jung. More on him a little bit later. But the electric complex is the companion to the Oedipus complex, but the electric complex is that for girls. In this instance, a girl desires the attention of her father and wishes to take her mother's place. Jung also said the girls are angry with their mother for not providing them with a penis, hence the term penis envy. Now, so that's Freud and the highlights of Freud. Very controversial, some of those things. So now we see people who were studying under and very fond of what Freud did to a certain extent. These individuals that followed Freud and followed some of his teachings were called Neo-Freudians or New Freudians. Adler, Erikson, Jung, and Horney. Freud attracted these followers who modified his ideas to create new theories about personality. These theorists refer to themselves, as I stated, Neo-Freudians. They generally agreed with Freud that childhood experiences do matter, but de-emphasized sex, focusing on social environment and effects of culture on personality. The four notable Neo-Freudians are included here are Alfred Adler, Erik Erikson, who we've seen before, Carl Jung, and Karen Horney. So let's look at them real quickly here. Carl Jung highlighted universal themes in the unconscious as a source of creativity and insight, found opportunities for personal growth by finding meaning in moments of coincidence. Alfred Adler focused on the fight against feelings of inferiority as a theme at the core of personality. Karen Horney criticized the Freudian portrayal of women as weak and subordinate to men. She highlighted the need to feel secure in relationships. Erik Erikson, whom we've seen before in our lectures and conversations, Erikson emphasized the social relationships that are important at each stage of personality development. In contrast to Freud's emphasis on sex, Erikson identified 8 stages, each of which represents a conflict or developmental task. Jung was interested in exploring what he referred to as the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is a universal version of the personal unconscious, holding mental patterns or memory traces which are common to all of us. We have their ancestral memories, which Jung called archetypes, are represented by universal themes in various cultures as expressed through literature, art, and dreams. 2 attitudes or approaches toward life he also theorized were extroversion and introversion, which we've talked about briefly before. Introversion are those people who are more inwardly focused. They're not very outgoing. They may tend to be shy sometimes. They keep to themselves sometimes. Not saying they're not sociable, but they're not very gregarious and outgoing. At a party, an introvert may be more likely to be seen as shy. They may find a corner somewhere, sit down, and let the party come to them, but not go out and seek it. Whereas an introvert, who's more outwardly focused, they may be more of a life of a party. At a party, they may go out and seek connection and entertainment, so to speak. So those were some of the things that we saw these Neo-Freudians do that were somewhat different. Their focus was somewhat different than that of Freud's. Although many people may diss Freud now, Freud was very instrumental in being the first to really develop a very comprehensive view and ask some very comprehensive questions about personality and how the personality develops.